Exxon Mobil is not happy with President Joe Biden for politely asking that they, slow down with exporting fossil fuels outside of the country when clearly we need those resources here domestically. Now, in response to the administration's latest criticism, Exxon has demanded that they be allowed to export oil for cheap because they want to make as much money as they can by selling those resources to the highest bidder. And sometimes the highest bidder is abroad, not a domestic business or people here in the United States. So here's what provoked Exxon, okay? This all started in August when Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm wrote a letter to oil companies asking them to reduce foreign exports of fuel instead send that oil to the East Coast, which needs inventory to get through things like, hurricane season, for instance. And for oil companies, that is a big no-no because that means that they're not going to be able to, make the tremendous profits that they're making now. They'd still be making profits, significant profits, but not as much. So they did not want to comply. And so Granholm wrote that the Biden administration would consider, quote, additional federal requirements or emergency measures, which would likely be a limit on oil exports. And reportedly, Granholm has discussed export limits in private conversations with big oil executives. But fact of the matter is, so far it's just talk. They haven't implemented anything. They haven't introduced any type of legislation that would curb oil exports. And a fun fact that I've mentioned on this show and repeated on the show multiple times, while the right wing, which of course is in the pocket of these big oil companies, would have you believe that we have really curbed drilling for these resources. Fact of the matter is we are the top producer and top exporter of oil. Top producer, top exporter. They don't tell you that because they want you to believe that the reason why we're having energy issues is, these crazy environmentalists have really restricted our ability to drill for oil. It's all nonsense. Again, look it up. We are the top driller, top exporter. Now, Darren Woods, who's the CEO of Exxon, responded in a letter to the Biden administration, essentially crying. He says this: continuing current Gulf Coast exports is essential to efficiently rebalance markets, particularly with diverted Russian supplies. Reducing global supply by limiting US exports to build region-specific inventory will only aggravate the global supply shortfall. Yeah, that's a fancy way of just saying what he actually meant to say, which is this next graphic. Free market incentives remain the most efficient way for the industry to address these problems. Free market means we want to maximize our profits. And so we will engage in the free market ideology of selling these natural resources, the oil in this case, to the highest bidder, even if it screws over the people living in the country where we have leased land, public land, to drill for this for oil. That's really what's happening here, and it's infuriating. And there's a reason why this is taking place. It absolutely does have to do with a policy change that took place in 2015 under the Obama administration. I'll get to that in just a moment. John, I'm sure you've got a lot to say about this.
Yeah, I wish that he just skipped to the second graphic. We would prefer to sell it where we can make more money. Which is fine. If you're going to allow things like oil to be a thing that isn't owned by the government, it's owned by these corporations and can be sold, then you can do that. I don't think that you should. I think that we should have that. It should be nationalized. It's a threat to all of us. But just skip to that then. Don't lead with the, well, I'm just worried about unbalanced markets. I don't like to look and see a market and it's unbalanced. It's this like CEO OCD thing about me. And I just want to see them balanced, I want the karmic balanced. No, just you want to make money. That's what you want to do. You want to make money. And why, but again, why wouldn't he obscure things when there is such a glaring lack of information about this amongst regular people? Like you pointed out, how much oil we produce and export. I don't know what percent of the American public we think would accurately be able to identify that as a position that we hold internationally, but I'm assuming it's very small. But like that is such a high level version of the information for most people. Like you've seen this in the past. A lot of Americans seem to think that the oil that's drilled here is sold here. They seem to think that if we drill more, our prices will go down. And not just as a measure of the overall global average price going down a tiny little bit. They think it's like you drill it in Montana and then it's sold in Montana, right? Most people think that, and honestly, it's complex. These markets are super complex. I don't know why they wouldn't think that, but that is very much not what is going on. And politicians and the industry know that people don't get how any of this works. And that's why they tell so many lies about regulation and about new drilling. And all of that is playing to a massive amount of ignorance amongst the American people.
Well, we are in the information business, so let me inform you guys, give you the context on what has actually transpired policy-wise that has allowed for major oil companies like Exxon to essentially export these resources. So back in 1975, there was actually an important bill that was signed by President Ford. He signed the Energy Policy and Conservation Act of 1975. The law increased the domestic oil supply by banning crude oil exports unless approved by the US Department of Commerce. No exports to countries outside of North America ever received authorization. Okay, so that's what was transpiring back then with that, again, that law that passed in 1975. Now, at the end of his second term, Obama repealed the legislation, okay? So overall, crude oil and petroleum product exports have increased by 80% since 2015. A 2019 analysis by the Government Accountability Office found that the 2016 repeal allowed domestic producers to charge higher prices relative to foreign oil. And so going back to what John said about balancing the markets, this is what balancing the markets looks like for Exxon. Let's go to graphic 3 here. In the last 12 months, Exxon generated nearly $39 billion in profits, not revenue, in profits, pure profits. While consumers face surging costs at the pump, thanks primarily to high gas prices, the company has paid out over $21 billion to investors through dividends and stock repurchases because this is how the system is supposed to work. This is Exxon's what? What's my favorite word, John? Fiduciary responsibility.
Okay, I thought you were gonna say feckless. It's the other F one.
I love the F words, but fiduciary is one of my favorites because that is literally what the system entails. It is what the system expects of them to return on investment.
Yeah.
And that is, again, their fiduciary responsibility, maximize profits. This is how the system is supposed to work. That's why if you genuinely are concerned about the greed and the exports and all of that associated with this story, you'd want to nationalize those natural resources. But I mean, both Democrats and Republicans have a literal financial interest to tell you otherwise.
Yeah, if you say the word nationalized, they're probably gonna take down this channel. So I mentioned earlier some of the ignorance. I have to admit that I'm feeling a little bit ignorant right now because you cited that number about the payouts and stuff, and I honestly don't understand how it works because they made all this money, but they only made that money because of supply chain issues and everything cost more, so they had to pay more to produce it. So where did all of that extra money go to their shareholders? I don't understand. They were just naturally responding to increased prices and difficulties in logistics. So where did the extra money come from? That's so weird. Someone should definitely not look into that ever. No one should ever in government look into that and why it is that they suddenly have billions and billions of extra dollars that didn't need to cover increased cost of oil extraction or transport.
Yeah, I mean, the price gouging that has transpired just simply by exploiting the corporate media's narrative of inflation has just been so destructive for ordinary Americans. It has been crushing us while they're making record corporate profits and pretending like they're justified in doing so. Pretending like they themselves are victims of what has happened as a result of the COVID pandemic. No, you guys are doing fine. Your investors are doing fine. Your board is doing fine. The people who get screwed are the American people who effectively have no real representation in Congress. We have very few people who are actually looking out for us. And like even this story, like Biden, Granholm, like what is this? We're thinking about maybe doing something. Do it, just do it, do it.
Yeah.
Okay, no more thinking about doing it. You know they're price gouging ordinary Americans. Do something about it. I'm tired of hearing like the niceties and like we're talking about it in private. Not interested in that. I'm interested in knowing whether you're actually going to do something. And right now, it doesn't really seem like there's much.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.